I'll never forget the day I buried my daughter. I was 73 years old, standing in a funeral home that smelled like lilies and grief, wearing the same black dress I'd worn to my husband's funeral 15 years earlier. But this was different. This was wrong. Parents aren't supposed to bury their children. The natural order of things had been shattered, and I felt like I was drowning in a sea of condolences and pitying looks from people who couldn't possibly understand the depth of my pain. People kept filing past me, hugging me, whispering their sorrows. But their eyes kept darting around the room, searching for the same person I was looking for. Damien. My son-in-law. The man who'd promised to love my Lily in sickness and in health. The man who'd held her hand through 2 years of chemotherapy. He wasn't there. His absence was louder than any eulogy, more obvious than the massive floral arrangements that lined the walls of the chapel. Food poisoning, his mother had told me that morning on the phone, her voice tight and defensive. He's devastated, Clara. Absolutely devastated. He ate something bad last night and he's been violently ill. The doctors said he can't travel. I'd wanted to believe her. God, how I'd wanted to believe that there was a reasonable explanation for why my daughter's husband wasn't at her funeral. But something in my gut told me otherwise. Something felt terribly, horribly wrong. My niece, Brooklyn, was the one who showed me the truth. She was 24, always on her phone, always scrolling through social media. She approached me after the service, her face pale, her hands shaking as she held out her iPhone. "Aunt Clara," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I don't know if I should show you this, but you need to see it." Her fingers trembled as she pulled up Instagram. There on the screen was a photograph that would change everything. Damien, my supposedly food-poisoned son-in-law, was standing on a pristine beach in Cancun. The ocean sparkled behind him, impossibly blue. He was shirtless, tanned, holding a bright orange cocktail with an umbrella in it. His arm was draped around our gardener, Rowan, a 26-year-old with perfect abs and a smile that could sell toothpaste. They were both laughing, their heads thrown back, not a care in the world. But it was the caption that truly destroyed me. "Enjoy your life while you can," it read, followed by a string of emojis, a cocktail, a sun, a palm tree, and a skull. A skull. Posted 3 hours ago. While I was delivering a eulogy for my baby girl, while I was watching them lower her casket into the ground, Damien was posting beach photos with that caption. My legs gave out. Brooklyn caught me before I hit the floor. That's when I knew my grief would have to share space with something else entirely. Rage. What would you do if you discovered this at your child's funeral? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to see what Clara does next. You won't believe how this story unfolds. Damien waltzed back into town 3 days later like nothing had happened. I was at Lily's house, the home they'd shared, sorting through her belongings because someone had to do it. I heard his key in the lock and my entire body went rigid. He came in carrying a designer luggage set I'd never seen before, his skin golden brown from the Mexican sun, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He actually smiled when he saw me standing there. "Clara! I'm so glad you're here," he said, dropping his bags and moving toward me like he was going to hug me. I stepped back, my hand raised to stop him. He paused, tilting his head with practiced concern. "I know you must be upset that I missed the funeral. I wanted to be there so badly, but I was incredibly sick. My mother told you, right? It was brutal food poisoning from some seafood I ate." I pulled out my phone, hands shaking with fury, and shoved it in his face. The Instagram post filled the screen. "This doesn't look like food poisoning to me, Damien," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "This looks like a vacation." While we buried my daughter, while I stood over her grave and said goodbye to the only child I ever had, you were drinking cocktails on a beach with our gardener. Explain that. For just a split second, his mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating flash across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by a wounded expression that would have won him an Oscar. "Oh, Clara," he sighed, removing his sunglasses to reveal red-rimmed eyes that I didn't believe for a second. "I can see how this looks, but you have to understand. Lily was sick for so long. 2 years of watching her suffer, of watching her fade away. I was destroyed. Completely destroyed." He sat down on the couch, putting his face in his hands in a gesture of grief that felt rehearsed. "After she passed, I had a complete breakdown. My therapist said I needed to do something radical to process my grief. Rowan had been planning this trip for months, and when I told him what happened, he invited me along. He said it would help me heal. And you know what? Lily would have wanted this. She always said she didn't want me to be sad. She made me promise I'd keep living." I stared at him in disbelief. "You posted a photo with a skull emoji 3 hours after her funeral ended, Damien. You didn't even send flowers. You didn't call. And now you're telling me that my daughter, who loved you with every fiber of her being, would have wanted you to vacation in Cancun with the gardener while her body was still warm?" My voice was rising, decades of Midwest politeness finally cracking under the weight of his audacity. He stood up abruptly, his face hardening. "You're not thinking clearly, Clara. You're consumed by grief, and it's making you irrational. I loved Lily more than anything in this world, and I don't have to justify my healing process to you or anyone else. Maybe you should talk to someone about these paranoid thoughts you're having. This anger isn't healthy." He grabbed his bags and headed toward the stairs. "I need to unpack and rest. We can talk when you're calmer." And just like that, he dismissed me, leaving me standing in my dead daughter's living room, wondering if I was losing my mind. Has anyone ever gaslight you like this? Clara's about to discover something shocking that changes everything. Hit that subscribe button. I couldn't sleep that night. Damien's words kept echoing in my head, making me question my own sanity. Was I being irrational? Was grief making me see villains where there were none? I'd always liked Damien before Lily got sick. He'd seemed charming, successful, devoted. But something had shifted in those final months of her illness, something I'd noticed but hadn't wanted to acknowledge. He'd been distant, irritable, always on his phone texting someone he claimed was his grief counselor. The next morning, I went back to Lily's house. Damien's car wasn't in the driveway, thank God. I still had the spare key Lily had given me years ago, and I let myself in. The house felt different now, hollow and cold, like it knew its heart had stopped beating. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I needed to look. My daughter's voice seemed to whisper in my ear, urging me forward into her home office. I started with her filing cabinet, the one where she'd always kept important documents organized with color-coded tabs because that's the kind of meticulous person my Lily was. Birth certificates, property deeds, tax returns, all exactly where they should be. Then I found the life insurance folder, and my hands started trembling as I pulled out the paperwork. Lily had taken out a policy years ago, modest but reasonable, with me listed as the primary beneficiary. That made sense. We discussed it after her father died, the importance of being prepared. But there was another document in that folder, crisp and new, dated just 6 weeks before Lily's death. A policy change form. The primary beneficiary had been changed from me to Damien, and the coverage amount had been increased from $200,000 to $1.2 million. I read it 3 times, my vision blurring with tears. The signature at the bottom looked like Lily's, but something about it seemed off, too shaky, too uncertain for my daughter's usually confident handwriting. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything, my hands shaking so badly I had to brace my elbows against the desk to keep the images from blurring. $1.2 million. That's what my daughter's life was worth to Damien. That's why he'd been so eager to get away, to celebrate, to post that disgusting photo with that revolting caption. He wasn't grieving. He was cashing in. The office door suddenly opened behind me, and I spun around, my heart hammering. Damien stood there, his face twisted with anger. "What the hell are you doing in my house, Clara?" he demanded, advancing toward me. I clutched the insurance papers to my chest, backing toward the window. "This is my house now. Everything in it belongs to me. Lily left it all to me. And if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police and having you arrested for trespassing." His voice was cold, empty of the fake sympathy he'd shown before. This was the real Damien, and I was finally seeing him clearly. Clara just found evidence of something sinister. What should she do next? Comment below, and smash that like button. I went straight to the police station from Lily's house, the insurance documents clutched in my purse like evidence of a crime I was certain had been committed. The detective who met with me was a young man named Officer Hayes, probably in his early 30s, with kind eyes but a skeptical expression that made my heart sink before I even started talking. I laid everything out for him, the funeral absence, the Cancun photos, the mysteriously changed insurance policy, the shaky signature that didn't quite match my daughter's usual handwriting. Officer Hayes examined the documents carefully, taking his time, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe someone would finally believe me. Maybe someone would see what I saw. But then he slid the papers back across his desk and gave me a look I'd seen before, the same look doctors had given me when I'd asked if they were sure there was nothing more they could do for Lily. Pity mixed with dismissal. "Mrs. Patterson, I understand you're going through an incredibly difficult time," he began, his voice gentle but firm. "Losing a child is something no parent should endure. But what you're describing here isn't illegal. The insurance policy change was signed by your daughter, witnessed by a notary, and filed properly with the insurance company. Even if the timing seems suspicious to you, there's no evidence of coercion or forgery. People change their beneficiaries all the time, especially when they get married." I leaned forward, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. "But she was on morphine 6 weeks before she died." Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold a pen. "Look at this signature. Really look at it. Does that look like someone who was making a clear-headed decision?" I was practically begging now, desperate for someone to see what seemed so obvious to me. My daughter had been manipulated, maybe even threatened, into signing away her life insurance to a man who was already planning his celebration vacation. Officer Hayes shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I understand your concerns, Mrs. Patterson. But unless you have concrete evidence that your son-in-law forged the signature or physically forced your daughter to sign these documents, there's nothing we can investigate. The photograph from Cancun, while insensitive, isn't a crime. People grieve in different ways. Some people compartmentalize. Some people run away from their pain. It doesn't make them murderers or thieves." I felt my last hope crumbling. "So you're telling me there's nothing you can do? My son-in-law abandons my daughter's funeral to party in Mexico, changes her insurance policy right before she dies, and that's just normal behavior to you?" My voice cracked, tears streaming down my face. The detective handed me a tissue box, his expression genuinely sympathetic but ultimately unhelpful. He suggested I might want to talk to a therapist about my grief, maybe find a support group for parents who'd lost children. He said sometimes grief can make us see conspiracies where there aren't any. I walked out of that police station feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The system that was supposed to protect people like Lily, like me, had failed us completely. Damien had been careful, methodical, probably planning this for months or even years. And now he was going to get away with it, going to live his best life on my daughter's money while I mourned alone. Unless I did something about it myself. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I was done asking for help. I was done being the grieving mother everyone patted on the head and dismissed. I was going to find the truth myself, whatever it took. Have you ever felt like the system failed you? Clara's about to take matters into her own hands. Make sure you're subscribed. 2 weeks after the police dismissed my concerns, Damien started spending Lily's insurance money like he'd won the lottery. I knew this because our small town has eyes everywhere, and people couldn't wait to tell me about every extravagant purchase. He bought a cherry red Porsche that he parked deliberately in front of the house Lily had loved, the house where she'd planted roses in the garden and painted the shutters pale blue herself when she was still healthy enough to climb a ladder. Mrs. Chin from the corner store called me personally to tell me she'd seen Damien and Rowan shopping together, filling a cart with expensive champagne and imported cheeses. They were laughing, Clara, she said, her voice tight with disapproval. Laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. And Rowan was wearing a watch that must have cost $10,000. I'm so sorry, dear. I thought you should know. Every phone call, every sighting, every piece of gossip felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Then came the parties. Damien started hosting gatherings at Lily's house almost every weekend, and they were loud, obnoxious affairs that went until 3 in the morning. The neighbors complained to me because they knew I still cared about that property, about the memories it held. I drove by one Saturday night and saw the house lit up like a nightclub, music thumping so loud the windows rattled. Young people I'd never seen before were spilling out onto the lawn, drinking from red cups, dancing. Rowan was there, of course, playing host alongside Damien like they were some kind of power couple celebrating their success. I parked across the street and just watched, tears streaming down my face. That was supposed to be Lily's house. That was supposed to be where she raised children, grew old, built a life. Instead, it had become a party palace for the man who'd betrayed her and the boy toy he'd replaced her with. I took photos of everything that night, documenting the license plates, the faces, the chaos. I didn't know yet what I'd do with those photos, but some instinct told me to collect evidence, to build a case that the police wouldn't listen to but maybe someone else would. The worst came 3 weeks later when I received a certified letter in my mail. I signed for it with shaking hands, somehow knowing before I opened it that my nightmare was about to get worse. Inside was an eviction notice. Damien was serving me an eviction notice from the garage apartment I'd been renting on Lily's property for the past 5 years. The apartment where I'd lived so I could be close to my daughter during her illness, where I'd spent countless nights holding her hand and reading to her when she couldn't sleep. The letter was cold, professional, written in legal language that barely masked the cruelty beneath. Damien claimed he needed to sell the property to move forward with his life and create distance from painful memories. I had 30 days to vacate. 30 days to pack up 5 years of my life, to leave the last place where Lily's presence still felt tangible, where I could still smell her perfume in the hallway and hear the echo of her laughter. He wasn't just taking her money and her house. He was erasing her completely, wiping away every trace of my daughter like she'd never existed. I sat on my couch that night, the eviction notice in my lap, and something fundamental shifted inside me. The grief that had been consuming me transformed into something sharper, colder, more focused. I was done crying. I was done begging for help from systems that didn't care. I was done being the helpless old woman everyone pitied but dismissed. Damien had made a crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. He thought I was just a grieving mother who could be bullied and gaslit into submission. But I was Lily's mother, and she'd inherited her strength from someone. It was time for Damien to learn exactly what that meant. Clara's about to become a detective. You won't believe what she uncovers next. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single twist. I started my investigation the next morning with Lily's laptop, the silver MacBook she'd used for everything from writing grocery lists to managing her blog about living with cancer. Damien hadn't thought to take it because he probably assumed it was just an old computer with nothing valuable on it. He'd been too busy counting his insurance money to consider that my daughter might have documented her life, her fears, her suspicions. He'd underestimated Lily just like he was underestimating me. The laptop was password protected, but I knew Lily's passwords. She'd always used variations of our old cat's name, Whiskers, combined with significant dates. I tried a few combinations before Whiskers 2016 worked, and suddenly I was looking at her desktop, her wallpaper, a photo of the two of us from her wedding day. We looked so happy in that picture, so full of hope. I had to close my eyes for a moment and steady my breathing before I could continue. I couldn't afford to fall apart now. I had work to do. I spent hours going through her files, reading old documents, looking at photos, searching for anything that seemed out of place. Most of it was ordinary, recipes she'd saved, medical appointment notes, friendly emails with old college friends. But then I found a folder buried deep in her documents, hidden inside another folder, labeled simply JIC. Just in case. My heart started pounding as I clicked it open, and there inside was a treasure trove of evidence my daughter had been collecting for months before her death. The first document I opened was a journal entry dated 3 months before Lily died. "I think Damien is having an affair," it began, and my hands started shaking so badly I had to set the laptop down. I made myself a cup of tea, sat back down, and forced myself to read every word. Lily detailed how Damien had become increasingly distant, how he spent hours on his phone texting someone he claimed was his therapist but would panic and hide the screen whenever she came near. She wrote about mysterious charges on their credit card, expensive dinners at restaurants they'd never been to together, hotel rooms booked in the city where she knew he had no business meetings. She'd even hired a private investigator for 2 weeks, and the results confirmed her worst fears. Damien and Rowan. The gardener she'd hired to maintain the property because she was too weak to do it herself. But it got worse. There were emails between Lily and her actual therapist, discussing the immense pressure Damien had been putting on her to change her insurance policy. He told her it was just practical, that she should want to take care of her husband since they didn't have children yet, that she was being selfish by keeping her mother as the primary beneficiary. The therapist had advised Lily not to make any major financial decisions while she was on pain medication and feeling emotionally vulnerable. Lily had agreed. But apparently, Damien had worn her down. The last file in the folder was dated 2 weeks before Lily died, and it was a video. My hands trembled as I clicked play. My daughter's face appeared on screen, so thin and pale I almost didn't recognize her. Her voice was weak but clear. "Mom, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone and something doesn't feel right to you. Trust your instincts." Damien pressured me into changing the insurance policy. He said if I didn't, he'd leave me, and I'd die alone. I was so scared, Mom. I didn't want to die alone. But I think I made a terrible mistake. I think he's waiting for me to die so he can be with Rowan. I'm so sorry. Please don't let him get away with this. I love you. The video ended, and I sat there sobbing, clutching the laptop to my chest like I could somehow hold my daughter through the screen. She'd known. She'd been afraid and manipulated and trapped, but she'd been smart enough to leave me breadcrumbs. She'd left me the evidence I needed to destroy Damien and reclaim her honor. I made copies of everything, uploaded it to the cloud, saved it to 3 different flash drives, emailed it to myself at multiple addresses. I wasn't going to let anyone take this away from me. This was my daughter's voice from beyond the grave, and finally, someone was going to listen. Lily left Clara the evidence she needed. What happens next will leave you speechless. Like this video and subscribe. I spent the next 3 days locked in my apartment, barely eating, barely sleeping, going through every piece of evidence Lily had left me with the precision of a lawyer preparing for trial. I made timelines, cross-referenced dates on credit card statements with Damien's supposed work trips, matched the mysterious hotel bookings with times when Lily had been in the hospital for treatments. The pattern was undeniable, methodical, cruel. Damien had been living a double life for at least 18 months before my daughter died, and he'd used her illness as cover for his betrayal. But I couldn't just go back to the police with this information. Officer Hayes had made it clear they weren't interested in what he called my conspiracy theories. I needed something bigger, something public, something that would expose Damien in a way he couldn't gaslight or dismiss or explain away with his charming smile and practiced grief. I needed an audience that would believe Lily's voice more than his lies. That's when I remembered the party Damien was planning. For weeks, I'd been seeing posts on social media about a celebration of life event Damien was organizing for Lily. He positioned it as a beautiful tribute, a way to honor her memory with music and stories and community. He'd even partnered with the hospital where Lily had received treatment, claiming he was raising money for their oncology department. The whole town was talking about it, praising Damien for being so strong, so devoted, so committed to turning his grief into something positive. It made me physically sick. I reached out to my daughter's best friend, Madison, who'd been suspicious of Damien from the beginning. We met at a coffee shop on the edge of town where I knew Damien and his friends never went. I showed her everything, the journal entries, the emails, the video. Madison cried so hard she couldn't breathe for several minutes, and then her sadness transformed into the same cold fury I'd been carrying. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her jaw set with determination. Together, we hatched a plan. The celebration of life was being held at the community center, a beautiful venue with a stage and a projection system that Damien planned to use for a slideshow of Lily's photos. Madison, who worked in event planning, knew the tech guy who was managing the audio-visual equipment. For $500, money I didn't really have but spent anyway, he agreed to give us remote access to the projection system. Damien wanted to use technology to create a beautiful tribute to my daughter. I was going to use that same technology to show everyone who he really was. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying my daughter's video, her weak voice saying, "Please don't let him get away with this." I thought about all the people who'd dismissed me, who'd told me I was crazy, who'd looked at me with pity like I was just a delusional old woman unable to accept reality. Tomorrow, they would all see the truth. Tomorrow, Damien would stand in front of everyone who'd praised his strength and devotion, and my daughter would speak from beyond the grave to tell them exactly what kind of man he really was. I wasn't doing this for revenge, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. I was doing this because Lily deserved to be heard, because her truth mattered more than his lies, because some betrayals are so profound they can't be swept under the rug with charm and crocodile tears. Clara's plan is genius. The confrontation is coming in and it's going to be epic. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell icon. The community center was packed when I arrived, and I had to fight the urge to turn around and run. More than 200 people had shown up for Damien's celebration of life, filling every seat and lining the walls. They dressed nicely, brought flowers and cards, come to honor my daughter's memory. They had no idea they were about to witness something very different from the touching tribute Damien had promised. Madison met me at the side entrance, squeezing my hand so hard it hurt. "The tech is ready," she whispered. "Everything's uploaded and queued. Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked across the room at Damien, who stood near the stage wearing an expensive dark suit and greeting guests with somber handshakes and humble smiles. Rowan was there too, sitting in the front row, pretending to be just another mourner instead of the affair partner who'd helped destroy my daughter's final months. The rage that had been building in me for weeks crystallized into absolute certainty. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I told Madison. My daughter had left me those files for exactly this moment. It was time to give Lily her voice back. The program began with music, one of Lily's favorite songs, and I had to bite my lip to keep from crying. Then came the speeches. Friends and colleagues stood up to share memories, stories about Lily's kindness, her humor, her courage during her illness. Each story was beautiful and true, and it made what Damien was about to do even more disgusting. Finally, he took the stage, dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief, and the room fell silent in respectful attention. "Thank you all for coming," Damien began, his voice perfectly calibrated between grief and gratitude. "Lily was the love of my life, my soulmate, my everything. Watching her fight cancer was the hardest thing I've ever endured. But she never complained, never gave up hope, never stopped thinking about others even when she was in pain. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd keep living, keep finding joy, keep making a difference in the world. That's why I've partnered with Memorial Hospital to establish the Lily Patterson Memorial Fund for Cancer Research." The crowd murmured approval, and I felt Madison tense beside me. Damien was good, I had to give him that. He positioned himself as the devoted husband, the grieving widower channeling his pain into philanthropy. He started the slideshow, beautiful photos of Lily flashing across the screen behind him, her wedding day, vacations they'd taken, candid shots of her smiling despite her illness. People were crying, reaching for tissues, completely taken in by his performance. "Before we close tonight," Damien continued, building to his finale, "I want to share one final tribute to Lily. A video message she recorded, something private that I think captures who she really was." He signaled to the tech booth, and I knew this was my moment. Madison nodded to our contact, and instead of whatever sentimental video Damien had prepared, the screen went dark. Then my daughter's face appeared, thin and pale and heartbreakingly honest, and her voice filled the room. "Mom, if you're watching this, it means I'm gone and something doesn't feel right to you. Trust your instincts." Damien pressured me into changing the insurance policy. He said if I didn't, he'd leave me, and I'd die alone. I was so scared, Mom. I didn't want to die alone. But I think I made a terrible mistake. I think he's waiting for me to die so he can be with Rowan, our gardener. I'm so sorry. Please don't let him get away with this. I love you. The video ended, and the silence in the room was deafening. Justice is coming. Hit like if you're Team Clara, and subscribe to see how this ends. For 3 long seconds after Lily's video ended, the community center was absolutely silent. 200 people sat frozen, trying to process what they just heard, trying to reconcile the devoted husband they'd been watching with the manipulative man my daughter had described. Then the room exploded into chaos. People started shouting questions, gasps and exclamations echoing off the walls. Damien stood on stage, his face cycling through shock, rage, and panic like he couldn't decide which mask to wear. "This is insane," he shouted into the microphone, his voice cracking. Someone hacked the system. This is a sick joke. That video is edited, it's fake, Clara must have," he pointed at me accusingly, but I was already walking toward the stage. Madison projected the rest of the evidence onto the screen behind him. Bank statements showing the hotel charges. Screenshots of text messages between Damien and Rowan that my daughter had recovered from their shared phone plan. The timeline of the insurance policy change coinciding with his affair. I climbed the stairs to the stage, and Damien backed away from me like I was contagious. I took the microphone from his shaking hand and turned to face the crowd. "My name is Clara Patterson, and that was my daughter speaking to you. Lily knew something was wrong in the months before she died. She was scared and vulnerable and dying, and the man she loved used that against her. She documented everything because she was afraid no one would believe me if I tried to tell the truth. She was right. The police didn't believe me. But she made sure her own voice would be heard. The crowd was riveted now, and I could see people pulling out their phones, recording everything. Damien tried to grab the microphone back, but Madison's brother, a former college linebacker, stepped between us, creating a barrier Damien was too smart to challenge. I continued, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. My son-in-law didn't attend my daughter's funeral because he was in Cancun with his affair partner, partying on the beach and posting photos about enjoying life while you can. He changed her insurance policy to make himself the sole beneficiary of $1.2 million weeks before she died. He's been spending that money on cars and parties and erasing every trace of Lily's memory from her own home. Mrs. Chen stood up in the audience, her face red with anger. I saw him shopping with that boy, she said loudly, pointing at Rowan, who was trying to slink toward the exit. Buying expensive champagne and jewelry like he'd won the lottery. 3 weeks after Lily died. Other voices joined hers, neighbors confirming the parties, the extravagant spending, the callous way Damien had been behaving. The narrative he'd carefully constructed was crumbling in real time, destroyed by my daughter's own words and the evidence she'd been brave enough to collect. Then something happened I hadn't anticipated. A woman in the back of the room raised her hand tentatively. She identified herself as Jennifer from the insurance company that had issued Lily's policy. I need to ask some questions about this policy change, she said, her voice professional but concerned. Based on what I've just heard and seen, I'm obligating myself to report potential fraud to our investigation department. If Mrs. Lily Patterson was coerced into making these changes while mentally incapacitated by medication, that policy payout may have been fraudulent. I watched the blood drain from Damien's face as he realized the full extent of what was happening. This wasn't just social humiliation. This was potential criminal investigation. Fraud. Exploitation. Maybe even something worse if the authorities decided to examine exactly how Lily had died, whether her medications had been tampered with, whether her decline had been as natural as everyone had assumed. Damien pushed past Madison's brother and ran off the stage, Rowan scrambling after him, and for the first time since my daughter's death, I felt like I could breathe. Speech balloon, the truth is finally out. But Clara's not done yet. Chapter 10 brings the ultimate vindication. Subscribe and like if you're still watching. The aftermath of that night was swift and merciless. The video Madison recorded went viral within hours, viewed millions of times across social media with captions like "Widow exposes husband's evil plan" and "Dead woman's message destroys fraudster." The court of public opinion moved faster than any legal system could, and Damien became a pariah overnight. His employer, a prestigious architectural firm that valued its reputation above all else, fired him within 48 hours. Friends stopped answering his calls. Even his own mother called me to apologize, crying so hard she could barely speak, saying she had no idea what her son had become. The insurance company launched a full investigation into the policy change, and what they found was damning. The notary who'd supposedly witnessed Lily's signature admitted under questioning that Damien had paid him $5,000 to backdate the documents and notarize them without actually being present for the signing. Security footage from the hospital showed Damien entering Lily's room alone on the day the documents were supposedly signed, staying for less than 10 minutes, leaving with papers tucked under his arm. Lily had been heavily sedated that day, her medical records showed, barely conscious and certainly not capable of understanding complex financial documents. Within 2 weeks, the district attorney filed formal charges. Insurance fraud. Elder abuse, since they classified coercing a dying person as a vulnerable adult. Forgery. The charges carried a potential sentence of 15 to 20 years in prison. Damien tried to claim he was the real victim, that I'd manipulated everything, that Lily's video was somehow faked. But digital forensics experts confirmed the video's authenticity, verified its metadata, proved it had been recorded exactly when Lily's journal said it was, months before her death when she was still lucid enough to know what she was documenting. Rowan, the gardener, turned on Damien immediately when the FBI came knocking. He'd only been 24 when Damien seduced him, he claimed, young and naive and starstruck by the older man's money and attention. He provided text messages showing Damien had promised him a beautiful life together once the Lily problem was resolved. Those exact words. The Lily problem. My daughter, fighting for her life, had been reduced to a problem that needed resolving. The prosecutor added conspiracy charges based on Rowan's testimony. The trial was long and brutal, but I attended every single day, sitting in the front row where Damien couldn't avoid seeing me. I watched him try to charm the jury with the same manipulation tactics he'd used on Lily, on me, on everyone. But my daughter's video testimony was too powerful, too raw, too heartbreakingly real. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. When the judge sentenced Damien to 18 years in federal prison, I finally let myself cry tears that weren't born from grief but from relief, from vindication, from the satisfaction of knowing Lily's voice had been heard and believed. The insurance company voided Damien's claim entirely and, after reviewing the evidence, reinstated me as the rightful beneficiary according to Lily's original wishes. $1.2 million. Money I'd never wanted, money that represented my daughter's death. But I knew exactly what to do with it. I established the Lily Patterson Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting cancer patients and their families. We provided financial assistance, counseling services, legal advocacy for vulnerable patients who might be facing exploitation. We made sure no one else would suffer what my daughter had suffered in silence and fear. I bought back Lily's house from the foreclosure proceedings after Damien's assets were seized. I couldn't live there myself, too many painful memories, but I turned it into a recovery home for cancer survivors who needed a peaceful place to heal. I restored the rose garden Lily had planted, added new flowers every season, maintained the blue shutters she'd painted with her own hands. The house became a living memorial to her, filled with life and hope instead of the darkness Damien had tried to bring. On what would have been Lily's 37th birthday, 2 years after her death, I sat in that garden with Madison and Mrs. Chen and dozens of other people whose lives had been touched by the foundation. We planted a new tree, a flowering cherry that would bloom pink every spring, and we shared stories about Lily, real stories, true stories, about her strength and kindness and the courage she'd shown even in her darkest moments. I looked at the house filled with recovering patients, at the garden blooming with life, at the legacy my daughter had left behind, and I finally felt peace. Damien had tried to erase Lily, to reduce her to nothing more than a source of money and an inconvenience to be eliminated. Instead, she became immortal. Her foundation helped thousands of people. Her video testimony became required viewing in elder law classes, teaching future lawyers how to spot exploitation. Her story inspired other families to speak up, to trust their instincts, to fight for justice even when the system seemed stacked against them. My daughter had the last word, the final victory, and I made sure that word echoed far beyond what Damien could have ever imagined. I'm 75 now, and I still run the foundation with the same fierce determination that got me through those dark days after Lily's funeral. People ask me sometimes if I've forgiven Damien, if I've let go of the anger. I tell them the truth, I don't think about Damien at all anymore. He's irrelevant, a footnote in my daughter's story, rotting in a prison cell where he belongs. My focus is on Lily's legacy, on the lives we're saving, on the justice we're bringing to families who need it. That's not revenge. That's vindication. That's making sure my daughter's suffering meant something, that her courage in documenting the truth changed the world for the better. And every morning when I wake up, I know Lily would be proud of what we built from the ashes of her tragedy. Speech balloon Clara turned her grief into justice and her daughter's memory into a legacy. What did you think of this incredible story? Like this video, subscribe for more stories of justice and vindication, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a purple heart in the comments if you believe in karma and standing up for what's right. Clara's story proves that the truth always comes out, and mothers will move mountains for their children even after they're gone. Thank you for watching, and remember, enjoy your life while you can, but never at someone else's expense. See you in the next story.